how is it that an insect can just walk on water without sinking? Or how can a tiny glass tube instantly draw your blood upwards just by touching a single drop on your finger? And, why do premature babies sometimes struggle so hard just to take their first breath? Now, these real-life mysteries might seem totally unrelated, right? But here's the crazy part. They all rely on the exact same invisible forces hiding right inside everyday liquids. We look at water all the time, but beneath the surface, there's this massive microscopic battle of attraction, and it totally dictates how liquids behave in our macroscopic world. By the end of this explainer, you are going to completely understand the mechanics and the mathematical formulas behind all of these phenomena. We're keeping it moving today, hitting 5 key areas: the invisible forces, surface tension and bubbles, the physics of breathing, capillary action, and finally, we're going to solve the redwood mystery.
All right, part 1, the invisible forces.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Everything we're about to talk about really comes down to a constant tug of war between 2 types of attractive forces: cohesive forces and adhesive forces. Cohesive forces are the attractions between molecules of the exact same type. Think of it like water molecules holding hands with other water molecules. This is exactly why you can hold a liquid in an open cup. The cohesive forces are holding the molecules together in a tight group. On the flip side, we have adhesive forces. These are the attractions between molecules of different types. So when raindrops cling to your glass window pane, that's adhesion at work. The water molecules are actually attracted to the glass molecules. So the balance between cohesion and adhesion dictates exactly how liquids interact with their environment.
Moving on to section 2, surface tension and bubbles.
So what happens when cohesion totally dominates? We get surface tension. Because water molecules are so deeply attracted to one another through those cohesive forces, they constantly pull inward. The molecules right on the surface don't have any water molecules above them, right? So they get pulled inward and sideways by their neighbors, shrinking the surface down to the absolute smallest possible area. Honestly, it's best to think of the liquid surface like a stretched elastic sheet, or maybe a trampoline. When an insect lands on a pond, it doesn't actually float. It just dents the surface. That surface tension acts as a restoring force, pushing right back up to support the bug's weight. You can even rest a solid iron needle on water. Now, iron is denser than water. It absolutely should sink. But as long as it doesn't pierce that elastic trampoline surface, the restoring force holds it right up. It's wild. Now, what's really interesting about this data is how surface tension varies wildly depending on the liquid. Look at water at 20 degrees Celsius. It has a surface tension of 0.0728 newtons per meter. But throw some soap in there, and it drops to 0.0370. It almost cuts it in half. That's exactly why soapy water doesn't bead up very well. But check out mercury's values. Mercury has a surface tension of 0.465 newtons per meter. That is massively higher than water. The cohesive forces in mercury are so intensely strong that it actually pulls itself into tight, almost perfect little spheres if you drop it on a table. Now, that cohesive shrinking effect is also why bubbles and droplets are perfectly spherical. That inward force is minimizing the surface area. But here's the catch. This creates pressure inside the bubble. To figure out the gauge pressure, which we'll call P inside a spherical bubble, we use this formula. P equals 4 times gamma divided by R. Gamma is our surface tension, and R is the radius of the bubble. Now, because R, the radius, is sitting there in the denominator, this tells us something absolutely crucial. Pressure is inversely proportional to the radius. In plain English, the smaller the bubble, the greater the pressure inside of it. Let's test that logic with a quick question. Imagine you have 2 balloons, one large, one small, and they're connected by a hollow tube with a closed valve right in the middle. If you open that valve and let the air flow freely between them, what actually happens? Does the big balloon empty into the small one? Do they sort of equalize, or does something else happen? Think about our formula for a second. What's your guess? If you guessed they equalize, you'd be wrong. The smaller balloon actually collapses completely, inflating the larger one. It feels totally counterintuitive, right? But the math completely backs it up. A smaller radius means a tighter curve, which generates a much higher internal pressure squeezing on that trapped gas. So the high pressure in the small balloon literally forces its air into the lower pressure environment of the large balloon. All right, section 3, the physics of breathing. Let's connect this balloon concept directly to your own survival. Our lungs are packed with hundreds of millions of tiny mucus-lined sacs called alveoli, and they act just like tiny bubbles.
Now, because they're wet, surface tension constantly wants to collapse them, just like that small balloon we just looked at. So how do we survive exhaling? Well, nature came up with a genius solution. Our lungs produce a liquid containing a lipoprotein that acts as a surfactant. Let's break this down into 2 steps. When you inhale, your alveoli stretch. These lipoprotein molecules get pulled apart and the surface tension actually increases. This is good. It keeps the sacs from expanding too far and popping. But when you exhale, as the radius gets smaller, those surfactant molecules slide back together. This dramatically decreases the surface tension. Without this incredible surfactant, the massive pressure of a shrinking radius would cause our lung sacs to collapse completely. And sadly, this is a real and severe condition known as hyaline membrane disease, which is fairly common in premature infants who just haven't fully developed the surfactant yet. So you see, physics isn't just textbook theory. It's literally the breath in our lungs.
Moving right along to section 4, capillary action.
Now that we've seen cohesion at work, let's bring the solid world back into the mix, where adhesion joins the fight. Have you ever noticed how water beads up on a freshly waxed car, but just flattens right out into puddles on bare paint? This brilliantly illustrates the battle between cohesive and adhesive forces. On the wax, the water's attraction to itself, its cohesion, is way stronger than its adhesion to the wax, so it pulls into a tight little bead, creating a large contact angle. But on the bare paint, the adhesive forces between the water and the paint are actually stronger than the water's cohesion, so the water gets pulled flat toward the car's surface, creating a very small contact angle. Now, when this same battle happens inside a narrow tube, we get capillary action. This is the tendency of a fluid to either be raised or suppressed in a narrow tube. And this is exactly how a medical tech can draw blood into a tiny glass tube just by touching it to a drop on your finger. The adhesive forces between the water in your blood and the glass are stronger than the cohesive forces in the blood itself, so the liquid actually climbs the walls of the tube. But remember mercury from earlier? Mercury's cohesive forces are so immensely strong that it actively resists the glass. So in a tube, mercury curves downward and is suppressed. It's pushed even lower than the surrounding surface level. So, to calculate exactly how high a fluid will rise, which we'll call height, or h, we use this formula. I know it looks a bit complex, but it's really quite logical. Height equals 2 times the surface tension times the cosine of the contact angle divided by the fluid density, gravity, and the tube's radius. Notice what's sitting at the bottom of that fraction, r, the radius. This means capillary action is inversely proportional to the tube's radius. Simply put, the smaller the tube, the higher the liquid is going to climb. It's also inversely proportional to density. A heavier fluid just can't be lifted as high. Make sense? Let's take that formula and test it on a massive scale. Section 5, the redwood mystery. 100 meters, wait, this is super important. Giant redwood trees can grow well over 100 meters tall. Now, they don't have hearts, they don't have mechanical pumps, and yet they constantly push heavy, watery sap from their roots all the way up to their highest leaves. Textbooks will often mention capillary action when talking about plants, but is capillary action actually strong enough to push sap up a 100-meter skyscraper of a tree? Well, let's run the math from our new formula. To achieve a height of 100 meters using capillary action alone, the tree's internal plumbing, these tubes called xylem, would need a microscopic radius of 1.41 times 10 to the negative 7 meters. But biologists have measured actual xylem tubes, and they're about 2.5 times 10 to the negative 5 meters. They are way too wide. The math absolutely proves that capillary action alone is just too weak. It can only raise sap a little over a single meter in tubes that wide. So if capillary action falls short, and we know fluids can push but generally can't be pulled apart without separating, how does the sap actually reach the top? The answer is transpiration. The cohesive forces of water are so incredibly strong that the water molecules essentially act like an unbroken physical steel chain running all the way from the roots up to the leaves. As water evaporates from a leaf at the top of the tree, it creates a massive negative pressure that literally pulls the next molecule up, tugging that entire 100-meter chain of water upward right along with it. It's nature's perfect pulley system. So the crucial point to take away from all this is that these invisible microscopic forces inside fluids completely shape our macroscopic world. Cohesion attracts identical molecules, while adhesion attracts different ones. Surface tension is simply the result of cohesion trying to minimize surface area, which creates pressure in bubbles and lets insects walk on ponds.
Capillary action allows fluids to climb narrow spaces, and without these very precise mathematical balances working in the background, our lungs would literally collapse, and the world's greatest forests would dry up.
Okay, so we've mastered how surface tension and pressure govern tiny bubbles in the microscopic alveoli in our lungs. But this opens the door to an even bigger question. How do fluid dynamics and pressure actually operate inside the rest of the complex, moving machinery of the human body? Think about blood pressure, eye pressure, spinal fluid.